Welcome to the Master in Design for Distributed Innovation webinar. Thank you all for connecting today. My name is Josefina Nano, and I'm the Master's Coordinator, and I'll be your contact point throughout this journey. So to begin this webinar, we are starting with an introduction to the program by one of its directors, Tomás Vivanco. Tomás is an architect. He has a Master in Advanced Architecture from IAAC, a Master in Advanced Design from Elizaba, and a PhD in Architecture and Urban Planning from Tongji University. He co-founded and co-directed Distributed Design Foundation and Fab Lab Santiago, one of the pioneers Fab Labs in Chile, and he is a lecturer of the course studio in MDDI. So Tomás, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Jose. Welcome everyone to this webinar. Today, we will have a very interesting conversation in between different faculty and students that are in different places of the world, but also who have very different profiles. And that's something that we promote in the program, in which we recognize diversity as a common and built-in truth for design and for innovating, where innovating and design now is not an option, it's a requirement in order to sustain and keep our lives. MDDI is structured in 3 main modules. Each module is represented in an academic term, plus a final project development. All the seminars of the program are aligned in 3 main tracks. The first ones are ecosystems, the second track are communities, and the third one is technologies. So we believe that in between the intersection of these 3 main tracks, we can build responsible, sensible, regenerative, and candidate technologies and solutions in order to keep the way or to, let's say, improve the way how we live, improve our relationships in between different species, and in order to change the productive paradigm that we have nowadays. The program is led by the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia and by the Fab City Foundation. Fab City Foundation is kind of a spin-off from IAAC, but also from the Global Fab Lab Network. That means that we work collaboratively with different Fab Labs that are all around the world. MDDI is offered in a hybrid model in which students are required to access to online classes, but at the same time, they have to prototype in the physical world. That means that students are not alone, studying by themselves in their rooms or in their offices in front of a computer screen, but they have to prototype in real life. They have to address local and global issues. To achieve that, we use our methodology that is called the Fab City Full Stack. That is a multi-layered methodology in which help us to understand complex problems, to decompose them, and to isolate design opportunities so we can address them level by level. Everything starts with the basic level of digital infrastructures or creative infrastructures, which are scaled up to reaching bioregional development of local communities. Now MDDI started in this first cycle with 15 students that are in different places of the world. We have students that are in China, in the US, in Canada, in South America, Europe, and also Asia, and also India. Now we are continuing on our way of trying to build this global network of change makers. We also invite different faculties and activists with completely different profiles, from biologists to engineers, from artists to people who take care of forests, or maybe sometimes we invite different indigenous communities. So we can have a very wide but also deep understanding of how our planet must be driven in the upcoming years. Today, we will have the presentation of Thomas Dugan, of Joana Daniés, and also from Santi Fiu of Fab Lab Barcelona, And also we're going to have presentation of our of some of our extraordinary students, Victor Frot and Anne Gafarel. So Jose, the stage is now there. I pass the ball to you. Thank you very much. Hope
Thank you,
enjoy.
Thomas. Thank you. So over to Giovanna. Giovanna Danies is a biologist and microbiologist from Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. She pursued her master's degree in plant pathology, also at Universidad de los Andes, and she received a PhD in plant pathology from Cornell University in New York. Amongst other courses she delivers, she is lecturer of the course Biotechnologies in MDDI, and she will share more about it. So Giovanna, thank you for being here, and the stage is yours.
Jose. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, a little bit of what I studied and what I do today, and also about the course I teach here in this degree. So the course is called Design and Biotechnology, a Necessary Bond. I am a plant pathologist. I did my undergraduate in microbiology and biology, and then did my PhD in plant pathology. And for more than 10 years, I have been studying a plant disease called late blight disease and a pathogen called Phytophthora infestans, which is also the causal agent of the disease that killed potatoes back in the mid-19th century and caused the Irish famine. So more than a century has passed since then, and it's still a devastating pathogen. And I have barely asked myself, if this is such an amazing pathogen, it must have amazing tools that perhaps somebody in the industry might use for a certain purpose. I began asking these questions when I was invited to co-teach a course to prepare design students to compete at the Biodesign Challenge, which is an international competition in New York City every June, and it unites scientists, designers, artists, and engineers to address the sustainable development goals in an interdisciplinary way. Since then, what used to be plant pathogens, such as this bacteria called Pseudomonas syringae, which I had been studying in my master's degree, also in biological sciences, what I can see is that these bacteria have proteins that are released. And what they do is that they freeze liquids inside the plant tissue, breaking the tissue and making the bacteria invade the plant. Design students, when they learned about these amazing proteins that are able to make ice at positive temperatures, so you can make ice in a refrigerator and you don't need a cooler, they said, wow, this is amazing. What else can we do with these proteins? And they, in their research, found out that these proteins are synthesized today, and they are used in places where they ski and it is not cold enough to make natural snow. They release the proteins in the air, and at 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, these proteins can make artificial snow. The amazing thing about design students is that they don't only become happy and interested in the biotechnology, but they also go and explore contexts, speak with people, and try to understand where can this technology be used that can actually solve a real world problem. And what they had identified is that in the transportation of vaccines to rural areas in Colombia, it was something that could be very useful because you rarely have access to coolers, but you do find refrigerators more often. But also they accompanied these people in their brigades to vaccinate people, and they found that they carried the vaccines in a styrofoam fridge, and they ended up with backaches. The vaccines, the vials, were placed randomly inside these coolers that were really heavy, and they broke. So they also designed the fridge, they designed the backpack so that the person that would carry the vaccines wouldn't have backaches at the end of the day. And this technology, which was called pseudo-freeze when it was a project, and now it's a startup called nano-freeze, because what we learned is that in engineering, the word pseudo, which for us became, we put the name pseudo-freeze because of the bacteria Pseudomonas. But pseudo in engineering means it freezes, and that's not the message we wanted to send. So it's now called nano-freeze, and it's a startup that creates refrigerating systems that are not that highly dependent on energy. And also they design these fridges that are foldable. So when they have to send it through planes or in any transportation, when it's filled with the content, you see it like this, but when you transport it back, that it's empty, you can fold it and reduce space and decrease in costs, costs for transportation. Another example is Jundo. And Jundo started by analyzing that today people spend most of their time in indoor spaces, and air inside indoor spaces is highly contaminated because of the things we use to clean our houses, because we all breathe out CO2. So they decided to create these panels that in the inside had algae. That algae can breathe our CO2 and release oxygen, but at the same time, you can transform this algae, genetically transform them so that they can produce smells that are fresh, smells that can make people work better. And you can also dream of including other genes that could do other things that could help in the air. So release, depending on what the person is feeling, if the person is feeling a little bit tired, or if they're feeling a little bit down for any reason, there's some volatiles that you can include into this algae that they can release and make you feel a little better. This is called aromatherapy or aromatherapy. And these are things, this is not a project that is working today, it's just a concept. But these are things that could be possible when you combine biotechnology and design. Another example is RootKnit. And RootKnit started a little bit with the same idea as Jundo, that people spend a lot of time in indoor spaces. But today, for example, university students, they don't really know how to take care of their plants. So these students, if the plant has something that is brown, and if it looks a little bit sad, what students usually do is add water. But they found that there's a lot of sensors available today that can sense the water, the humidity in the soil, the light that is coming into the plant, whether you clean the leaves or you do not, and nutrients in the soil. So they placed the sensors in the plant. They adjusted it to the requirements of the specific plant, and then they included a nitinol thread, which is a metal that they use in the brackets, and they store memory. So if your plant required water, this textile would become kind of condensed, kind of like trying to simulate what would happen in the plant. If it had excess of water, it would expand. If it had lack of light, it would become whitish. And if it had excess of light, it would become yellow. So it was a way for us to communicate with the plants in a different way, in a way that we could understand. And then you could extrapolate this to other contexts, to greenhouses, and see with a textile that you could have as a drawing or something, like hang in your wall. You could see the health of the greenhouse that you would have. Other examples in genetic engineering is, for example, bacteria that you can modify, and you can add genes that produce color. So for example, the green fluorescent protein, which we can see in the left, is a protein that comes from a jellyfish. We can include the gene into bacteria, and with those color producing genes produce inks or dyes that then we can use to stain textiles. And this is amazing, because if you deepen into the textile industry, into the pigments, you will see that these pigments are highly contaminants, and they contaminate water sources. And this is an alternative, a biological alternative for dyes. So the combination between biotechnology and design allow us to think about how can we imagine a future that is more sustainable at the end. We usually criticize plastics. Plastics has been an amazing material, for example, in the health industry, but for a use such as this plastics to wrap things that we unwrap in seconds, in 1 minute, in 2 minutes, and then this material will take a lot of time to return to nature. We could use alternatives as is this bacterial cellulose. Bacterial cellulose comes from a tea that perhaps some of you may have tried, kombucha. And it's a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And what they do is that they eat the sugar in the content in the tea, and then they they degrade the glucose into simple sugars that the bacteria can then use to turn into bacterial cellulose. So cellulose is one of the most common and abundant molecules in the world. All plants are made of cellulose, but in plants, cellulose is combined with other compounds. Instead, here we have a bacterial cellulose alone. We don't have to separate it from other compounds. And we can create this type of materials that can be used again to protect objects, but if we want to dispose them, we are confident that they will return to nature soon. Another example is styrofoam. And again, styrofoam is a material that is amazing, but it depends on the uses. So an alternative to styrofoam can be the combination between fungal mycelia, that is the roots that grow underneath the mushrooms, and agricultural waste. So mycelia will start to wrap on the agricultural waste, and if you leave it enough time, you can then use this interior, what is inside of the bag, and you put it inside molds, and then you can put it at high temperatures in an oven, and you can create a lot of different things. So this is a startup called Grown Bio, and it has turned it into furniture, into lamps, and also into isolation contents. So what we do in the course is that we follow a methodology called the biodesign pedagogy approach. And what I do is I listen to students' ideas. So students could start with a problem or an opportunity that they find in their context that they want to address. And then what we do is, through design thinking methodologies, try to find technologies, biotechnologies that can help address that problem. Other students begin with a fascination on a biotechnology. So for example, this year we had a student that was very interested in fungal growth and in mycelia growth, and in applying that into different contexts by using, for example, coffee waste. And the book, what the book does is that it shows examples of how you can use and apply biotechnology, how you can prototype from your homes or in laboratories that are equipped with minimal biology, like I don't know, a microscope or an oven, a Bunsen burner, things that you can actually find in a kitchen, perhaps. And it uses the design thinking methodology to find out problems or challenges that are in our context and we want to address. Sometimes finding out what I want to work on is challenging. So what we have done is that we create cards, a deck of cards that begin with the Sustainable Development Goals. So students can begin by exploring one of the Sustainable Development Goals that they feel akin to, then a context and a user, and start brainstorming what types of opportunities they find that combine the Sustainable Development Goal, the user, and the context that they want to work on. And with the project, with a systems thinking approach and a circular thinking approach, we end up with how we can find solutions to the specific problem we want to work with. So I will be happy to answer any questions later on today. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Joa. Well, thank you for that. Over to Thomas. So Thomas Dugan is an artist and also the director of Thomas Dugan Studio, a collaborative and multidisciplinary research studio exploring craft, design, material science, architecture, and sculpture. Thomas is a guest lecturer, workshop, and research facilitator at IAAC and lecturer of the More Than Human course in MDDI. So he will share more about it. Thomas, the stage is yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jose. So I'm just going to do like a 10-minute, quite a quick overview of some of the things that I've been interested in, and also just touch on the points that we delivered as a group during the course. So this is a screenshot from the Miro introduction. So we split it down into kind of 4 titles, one of material-driven multi-interfacing opportunities for complex systems. So that's more focused on the material aspect of things. Then we went into the biodesign landscape. So we had to look around our local self-assembling landscapes. And then on thirdly, we looked at from human-centric to nature-centric ecosystemic doing. So visiting our local environment and in an observational and a sensorial way. And then from that, we process those sensorial emotions into an understanding that we could start to communicate these very sensitive aspects. So I'll just kind of fly through. So the kind of interest that I have is very broad, and I try to share this with the students, and it can range from kind of the pedagogy of design into kind of biomaterial explorations that I have experienced in the past with reverse engineered silk, working as a kind of material scientist, as an artist, an engineer, and kind of a sharer of information. So this is kind of some of the inspiration, you know, very varied, from braiding sweetgrass, looking at ancient wisdom, how we can apply contemporary and ancient psychology and philosophy to design thinking and programs. I also work as kind of like a material engineer, where I publish science papers. So on one hand, I'm incredibly interested in how we can take the characterization of material and apply it to contemporary design challenges, and also to see the opportunities that we have for new materials and biomaterial exploration in contemporary landscapes. I'm also interested in how we can apply those to ancient understanding and ancient wisdom of how we can look to situated knowledge and embodied learning experiences. So on one hand, I work with very contemporary tools. So this is obviously a KUKA robot working with protein. So this is reverse engineered silk. So we take the Bombex Mori silk cocoon, reverse engineer it in a very simple process done at room temperature, all in water using basic salts. From this, we have a self-assembling protein, which we can dope with various amino acids, or we can stabilize biological matter such as blood and vaccines and things like this. I was working as an artist and an engineer for a company that approached me to stabilize seeds. So I took biological seeds and then stabilized them within this protein using lyophilization, so freeze drying. So the seeds become stable, and then when you throw these seeds in the air, they spin, land, and then the material is doped with an agent that can help support the seed growth. So this is kind of a translation into kind of an installation artistic form that has a background very much in material science and exploration. The basis of all life generally is through self-assembly. So this is something that I'm very fascinated in exploring. So we, as a group, looked at practical examples of this. So we worked with something called sodium acetate, which is a very safe salt. With this material, you can heat it to 52 degrees, and then the salt melts in water, becomes completely transparent. Below this temperature, it starts to crystallize and self-assemble. So we studied how we can observe these self-assembling processes in our kitchen environment using very basic materials and tooling. And then from that, we can then integrate those ideas of self-assembly into the wider landscape. So this idea of the full stack, we go from a very local, small environment of our kitchen, and we understand the self-assembling processes, and then we start to explore these externally in our wider environment. So some of the students had a very direct connection with how they can apply and understand these more than human processes and self-assembling processes into their project. And we kind of studied and focused on individually how we could then explore these ideas. So then moving into this idea of mutuality and how we can then live and understand and work within our environment. And a nice example of this is that we breathe in what the trees and plants and algae breathe out. So there's a continual relationship that we have with our built environment as well as our biological environment. So I'm interested in how we can explore that as a group. One very simple example of this that you might have heard, well, when I say simple, it's not simple, but this bobtail squid has found it a way of taking these biological bacteria that are bioluminescent and then filtering them from many millions of different bacteria in the sea. And in this kind of symbiotic mutual relationship, the squid then uses this bacteria to almost camouflage itself at night by imitating the stars in the night sky. So there's this incredible mutuality and relationship between multi-species interface. And this idea of how we can then take this into this very intuitive form. So I'm a strong believer in the way that I teach is trying to bring out this sense of intuition in people. So you have this very strong sense, this of giving this kind of like childlike wonder and intrigue back to the student and to give them space to explore what that is, alongside very contemporary expensive tools, alongside very basic, simple kitchen non-expensive equipment and things like this. So it's about exploring this idea of intuition and as a tool to make decisions faster, because a very common thing is that the faster you fail, the faster that you can learn, and then the faster you can then improve and develop. So I think offering that space where people have the opportunity to fail as fast as possible, and then if you keep doing that, then maybe at the end you can achieve something really incredible. Because in the way that you work as a scientist alongside an engineer or an artist, any of these things, is that you almost don't presuppose the result, but you explore all of the processing that goes on between your start and your end. So then we explore the external environment by rewilding our senses. So we take this understanding of external, local and global environment. So each student explores their local environment and brings that back to a shared environment. And then through this, we can start to create new languages that help us communicate these very complex ideas of nuance and intuition, and moving away from the universality of design, where you can start to look at very local projects and opportunities that can be very focused in your environment and have an incredibly strong impact. And then from that, you can see that as a cellular design process, so then you can start to scale up. So you can see your local environment and all the challenges and opportunities, and then to scale that up into a larger scale system. So then working with materials from, the very ancient materials and how we can then transform them into very contemporary design processes. So these are just some examples of my work, taking essentially kind of material research into an artistic exploration. And then this is a series of process evolutionary design sculptures based on material research. So yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Amazing. And over to Santiago, our last guest faculty speaker of this webinar. So Santiago Fontemilla holds a master's degree in architecture from the University of La Salle, Spain. He completed the Fab Academy in 2012, specializing in digital manufacturing and rapid prototyping at MIT's Center for Bits and Atoms. He leads the Future Learning Research Area in Fabra, Barcelona, and is a lecturer of the Design Tools 1, 2, and Holistic Technology courses in MDDI. So Santiago, the stage is yours to share with us insights about these incredible courses.
Thank you, Josefina. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, I will try to use the tools. So basically I will present over slides, and then I will go to the Miro board that I think is where we will see how basically students or participants of the masters are there, basically integrating all of the knowledge. So yeah, as you mentioned it, so we basically run, let's say, 3 seminars over the whole, let's say, masters. So we call it digital prototyping for design. And I'm not doing this thing alone. So actually, I'm part of the IAAC institution, also at the Fab Barcelona. And basically, we are running this together with Eduardo Chamorro and also Guillem Camprodon, our director. And just to give a little bit of context of everybody that doesn't know us, so IAAC actually it's situated in Barcelona, have 3 campuses, each of them like more or less organize it and with different and working with different topics. But we basically as an institution work as a multi-scholar and multidisciplinary approach. So it means that we go, our approach to way of how we interact with technology covers, let's say, from the city, let's say, umbrella or perspective to the materials. And we are very proud to incorporate all of these sensibilities and point of views into how it could be used technology. I will skip this video because it talks about Fab Lab Barcelona. But just for you to know, so Fab Lab Barcelona is one of the departments inside IAAC. It has 16 years running right now, trying to get impact in all scales in the city, in the city size. And nowadays we have we are more or less 30 people in the team, bringing, let's say, a lot of different like perspectives, and this is what it means as that we basically have, let's say, the sensibility in these different like areas that I will try to explain a little bit more now, because I think so it's it helps us to understand how technology can be meaningful and can help, let's say, to create like impact in the society. So we like to think about how can we produce distributed in a distributed way. So how could design could take the benefits that we are in a distributed network full of connectivity, and how can this help us to imagine and create new ways to produce things with the local resources, but sharing it distributed. So a classical example of this is the precious plastic project that it's a phenomenon nowadays in the world. So it's some, let's say, tools for recycling plastics with the idea of the connectivity in a way that we share the knowledge and the transfer. So how can we basically from, let's say, nowadays start thinking in these new trends of the future, and how can we become, how can be, let's say, part of it, taking a look of these weak signals that we can see that can be, let's say, can produce like a positive a change in the future. So we developed a methodology in Master of Design for Emerging Futures that allows us to reflect about these weak signals and take, let's say, action from now. So this critical point of view of what's in the future and how can we incorporate it in nowadays as a designer. So it's also one of the topics that we reflect. How can be technology helpful in the way that we produce, let's say, food, and how can we basically design and manufacturers open, let's say, tools for making the food production more accessible. What you are seeing here, it's a research project, a European research project, made it here also in the Fab Lab Barcelona together with a consortium that tries to create open source tools for microfarming and incorporating the last technology trends as artificial intelligence, and also, let's say, taking benefits of the digital publication processes that you can find it in a Fab Lab. So at the same part, I think so the last two faculties already explains the need of thinking also in the materials aspects of how do we produce and how can we basically take benefit of that. We also research in that area, also creating not just, let's say, the outcomes, also, let's say, educational programs for, let's say, make it everything even more accessible. So Fab Academy is one of those examples. It's a distributed educational program that runs in the Fab Lab network that nowadays are more than 2,000, that basically learns about how we can basically learn a little bit more about how can we be a little bit more sustainable and use, let's say, technologies that finds in a Fab Lab in a more meaningful way. And as I was mentioning, so the idea is not just to basically prototype or rapid prototype with this technology. It's also like, how can we make it more accessible for others to start like thinking, imagining, creating, designing, producing, let's say, with all of this knowledge. So future learning is the area that basically it's all time like thinking about how can we make all of these things more accessible. So and we basically take benefit of a lot of like research projects that we have in house to make it as more accessible. So in here we see the additional program also that was developed for creating or helping people to develop like circular labs in the cities, and the idea was to basically train them in a, let's say, a selection of digital manufacturing processes and also knowledge about how to deal with that. And I think so it's mentioned here, but ultimately we wanted to have a positive impact in the society, and we understand that the cities plays, let's say, a key role in here. So in 2012, 15, so we started a project that later on became like Fab City project. That was the idea of like how can we basically use, let's say, the infrastructure that is in the city to basically thinking how can we a little bit more sustainable in how we produce the things. So there was an idea of the neighborhood where the Fab Lab and IAAC is placed in Barcelona, and map it, an effort to map, let's say, all the different, let's say, actors, let's say, in the city, and how can we find or define strategies for collaborate a little bit. So this becomes later on in a platform for, let's say, artisans and manufacturers in the different cities to basically exchange and visualize their work and be able to produce like a little bit more sustainable. And the last part is how can we incorporate all the sensing aspects and data into this process. So these are more or less what the Fab Lab Barcelona and IAAC and me personally, or the team, is basically research on, and how can we incorporate this thing into the course. So at the end, some of the, let's say, key objectives of the course is to unfold, let's say, the foundations behind the technology. So I think so we see robots working on, so all of us work with technology that sometimes we even don't know how they work, this idea of the black box. So I think so the fact that we have access now to the technologies that allow us to understand what's happening behind the technologies also makes us to understand how can we interact or how can we create like bigger impact. So this is one of the key points. How can we use that for rapid prototyping? So as it was mentioned before, so how can we basically prototype fast and fail fast in order to continue like iterating and going fast? The mindset of the Fab Lab ecosystem and the maker ecosystem. So I think that's really important. So the idea of like working the distributed like systems, so be open in a way that we share our knowledge and processes. So I think such a key fundamental role of how we innovate now as a society and the potential that we have with the networks, and this will give us, let's say, the possibility to be more creative and critical. Yeah. So if we break it down more or less in these terms, so in the first term, we emphasize in the digital infrastructure that we need. So we based our methodology in another, let's say, educational programs that are in the network. So that is basically weekly, bi-weekly. So every week we introduce a new topic to the students, and the students, they have to reflect it and do it within a small task. As you can see here, these are some of the key topics that we work. So we understand, we start with the state of art, more or less what I was mentioning. So understand the philosophy of the network and how can we interact in that. So we understand, let's say, basic concepts of digitalizing like information. How can we use this information for be a little bit more sustainable? So how can we share all of that things to continue like developing or innovating, let's say? So how can we incorporate data, let's say, in our process, and how can we basically manipulate that data? In the term two, we basically move to the more, let's say, physical aspects of the digital prototyping. So we cover, let's say, the some basics processes of how can we basically start building things, okay, and how can we scale these things, and what are the implications and applications of developing something. So how can we basically create new or imagine new economical impacts in this open process. And let me finish, because probably I'm out of time. Just showing you more or less some of the tools. I think it was mentioned also. I don't know how fast it is. These are the Miro board that we use with our students. I think so it's a great tool just for see what other ones they are doing, and just to exemplify a little bit what I was mentioning. So this is one of the first exercises that they should do. It's basically mapping their potential. So, and the potentials goes in different, let's say, aspects. So which kind of knowledge they have available, which kind of resources they have available, and what kind of challenges they wanted to achieve. So at the end here, we're trying to promote collaboration in a network, but also collaboration in a local institution. So it should be this mix always if we wanted to have like a nice and clear impact. I think so. I just want to show to you a little bit how it looks, the exercise they are doing. So it's been really great. So we are trying to always give, let's say, as many possibilities for everybody to feel comfortable. So we basically understand that there's different backgrounds in the class, and not everybody knows, let's say, or have like previous experiences. So we try to basically cover or give opportunities for everybody to feel comfortable and experiment with that. This is, let's say, first term board, but I think so you can see that from algorithm designs to, for example, electronics and programming, visual, tools for, let's say, understanding data. So the idea in the first term and in the second term is to, so give the tools to the students to feel comfortable to start like imagining and creating. And I think so that's it, Josefina. I don't know if you want to.
Thank you, Santi. Amazing. And now, before we open the space for our Q&A, we also invited two students to share their experience during MDDI. We have Annie and Victor. So Annie, if you could briefly share with us your journey in MDDI, it would be great.
Yes, maybe we can complete each other. That could be maybe fun. So that for me, I came from a background of more a Fab Lab. So it's been 6 years I'm working in the first Fab Lab in Canada, Communautique. And my biggest question, because of my background of industrial design, was more about creating what are we or how are we going to create in the future. And I think with the MDDI and the different class, we can fully like practice and embody this full stack methodology of the Fab City, it can really open the door of how do we gonna do it, because we can do it on a cold way, and we can do it in a more warmer way, more human, let's say, an inclusive way. And I think this kind of situation where you're fully integrated into different workshops, different topics, different key topics also, that can really bring you a perspective of like, how can you create a positive impact? How can you transform your work to be more inclusive, to be more resilient in the future? And it will also release a lot of questions. So that was my biggest surprise of this MDDI, is that all the normality that you think, you have like very many questions that came out of those normality. For example, the material, what should be the best material, or how could we create those material? And this is this simple that you don't think maybe about it at the beginning, but at the end you're kind of re-questioning all the circle and all the full, actually the circle of how do you produce things worldwide or locally. And I think that was my biggest surprise and improvement, questioning this normality. And I really think what Santi said about and Thomas said about the instinct, when you do different kind of project that really tackle your instinct, like how can you tackle those questions that you don't have answer, and how can you develop like a reaction of where do you find the answer, and how can you find those answers with the communities around you? So I think those question of instinct could be really, well, a really great add to your skills. Victor, what do you think?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, well, thanks, Annie. I am from Lima, Peru, and yeah, I have my thoughts too. Actually, I'm a professor of industrial design in Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú here in Lima, and I also work in the public sectors, specifically in the Ministry of Tourism. And I believe that, for example, thanks to the master, I have been able to understand the role not only of human actors, but also non-human actors. That's a concept that I learned in the master. No? In the public sector, it's not usual to talk about, for example, animal species or plants. No? It's usual to talk about people, about citizens, right? But they don't consider the planet aspect in the public policies. But thanks to the master and using, for example, the full stack from Fab City and all the information I learned from the courses, I have been able to develop this project that is still in process related to a laboratory. A laboratory which the public is the public servants. No? It's a laboratory for public servants that work in tourism. No? And it's quite interesting because now I have more information. I can take it in a remote way, the master, and that's a very good facility for me. No? And that's it. That's what I've been learning. I connected it with the public sector, being designer, and I can also learn the different perspective of not only Annie and all my partners from the master, but also with the professors. No? And it's important, no? To connect with the world, to connect with the technologies, to connect with concepts related to nature, no? To life, to speculative design, no? And that's been very useful for my project of the laboratory that I hope it's implemented soon, no? Because we want to launch it as a national event, no? Having this laboratory, no? That is coming in August, I believe. I hope so. No? And that's it. That's my perspective.
Yeah. And as you can see, me and Victor have completely different background, but our partners too. We are in different kind of the world with different opportunity and different perspective of view. And I think we have all different kind of level and all different kind of way of seeing the world. And I think this is creating some kind of a richness to this program, is that sometimes you have a global problem that it's similar to a lot of countries, and sometimes you have local things that you can tackle that it's completely different, and each one of us could complete and could help each other to tackle those things. That's I think precious too.
Yes, thank you, Annie. Thank you, Victor. Amazing. You're sharing your experience. I think it's really valuable. And going over to the application deadlines for everyone, if you're interested in applying to MDDI, it is highly recommended you submit your application before the 31st of May. However, applications for this program will be open until the 31st of July. I will share my email and the link of submission in the chat. And also you can contact Alex Mademo, the admissions manager. And we can we have more than 5 minutes for Q&A. So whoever wants to open their microphones, we are here to address any questions you have.
Yeah, I would thank you very much, Jose, and thank you very much, Annie, and Victor, Thomas, Joe, and Santi. I have a cross question for everyone, because now we saw the presentation of Giovanna that is super super based on the development of biotechnologies, and Thomas in material experimentation or experimented with other organisms, right? Like interspecies design, and then Santi much more based in topics of digital manufacturing, but also in the impact of digital manufacturing in communities and in cities. So this is a question to the faculty, but also to Anya and to Victor, because of the different profiles, right? Victor works in the public sector, and he's trying to innovate from his side, and then Annie works in the lateral sector of fab labs that are much more located maybe in the mainstream of the creative industries. So how do you all see the cross-pollination that we can have by experimenting with diversity, by experimenting with materials, by understanding new processes of manufacturing that might impact, right, in a positive way, not only the daily life of people, but also public policies, right? Because it's a multi-scale, right? If we want to innovate, we have to innovate on one side from inside organizations and institutions, but also we can innovate by the lateral power, let's say, of people and communities. So how do you see this cross-pollination in between, let's say, society as a whole and the technologies that we can develop?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I mean, I think to have the scale that we need as a society to tackle these questions, I think as an individual concerned with issues of materiality and yeah, general kind of challenges that we have around that in relation to scaling, it needs to be you know, as well, you know, from this hierarchy of like a bottom-up system, but also the values of top-down systems can also be integrated. And I think that's where the kind of cross-pollination of how we can address some of the multi-scale challenges that we face is to work from both directions, and then to find how we can, you know, resolve these and communicate these challenges and resolutions to the society as a whole. So it's kind of, if you imagine like a sphere, you know, you can feel like you're looking in from the outside to the central point and then back out again. So in the same way as you have the full stack, but it's like this three-dimensional spherical system where you're constantly going through scales. And through scales means through society. So this diversity of society and the needs that we, as a material scientist or an architect, you know, you need to, as an architect, you can draw very beautiful buildings on your piece of paper, but to implement them, you need a whole team of systems thinkers, urban designers, planners, politicians, you know, it really goes across the scale. So I think to answer the question, I think is actually through collaboration and to have an impact across these various areas of society. An example of this is my friend Jo Royal. She worked on a project called Plastiki. So she was a around the world sailor, and she was sailing, and then she landed on an atoll in the Pacific and found just a huge amount of plastic on this deserted island. So then she was racing like a carbon fiber sailing boat, and then she immediately quit her job and then created something called Common Seas, which is basically a policy changing company. So she's gone from someone concerned with materiality into someone who is basically meeting, you know, on a weekly basis with government ministers, and she's working actively in policy change. So I think having that flexibility as an individual is a really good start.
Also, I think it's about learning from science. I think there's a lot of people that come from different contexts, and some of them haven't had the opportunity to read on research papers and read about scientific literature, and there's a lot that's already being done. So projects don't have to start from zero. They can start from knowledge, building up on knowledge. But also there's a field on speculative design, and speculative design pushes regulatory boundaries, because in art you're allowed to do things that perhaps in science you're not. So it is a means to make people reflect upon technologies and about uses, and what would happen if this would be our future, given that biotechnology allows us to do certain things, but that doesn't mean we can do them. What will be the effect on society? It can help us reflect. It can help us imagine a future where these technologies are going to be applied and are going to be in the hands of many people, because things that today may cost a lot and not everybody has access to them. In the future, more and more people will be able to use these things and access these technologies.
I think, Giovanna, it's pretty much linked to distributed design also, because it's a way also, if you introduce not only the human, but if you introduce like a greater amount of nature, or a little bit the voice of the thing that receive the impact, right? Like it could be a microorganism, or it could be the plants. Then you will have this kind of greater value also. It's kind of make me think about that, because if you do like the greater map, it will connect with the different impact and then the different problems, and then maybe the technology could be developed in that way of seeing in this bioregional sense. If we increase the amount, if we increase the size of the project, what could be the impact on, yes, the human, but the other ones too.
And with that experience, we can also have different questions, right? It's like very important to question everything, to develop this critical thinking in the people, not only the citizens, but also the people who are in charge of ministries, of companies, of educational institutes. So I believe that thanks to the master, we can also question, we can also think about new answers, design new activities between different stakeholders, in order to improve and to understand the impact of our decisions, not only the present, not only the future, but also the impact on people that we know and people that we don't know. So that's, I believe, something important from the master.
Yep, and thank you very much for your comments and answer. And as MDDI is kind of a weird program, right? Because we met in online classes, but at the same time, all the students are required to develop their projects in the real life, right? They have to prototype with a specific community. They have to prototype with physical materials. As Thomas was pointing, like your kitchen is your lab somehow. Your house will become your labs, and then your community and your neighborhoods will become the space for in which you implement and experiment with ideas, and then you can scale up these experiments to reaching a much more extended community and impacting your local cities, also your city, your neighborhoods, but also the natural ecosystem. So this prototyping, this physical prototyping idea, that on one side is material prototyping, but also another side is community prototyping. How have been your experience, Santi, when you have translated in a very, let's say, successful way what you do inside the Fab Lab, and you measure somehow the impact of what you do in the real world, and also you, Victor, that you are prototyping inside, let's say, the public sector. That's extremely weird, right? It's like taking the maker movement, let's say, of the Fab Lab movement inside a very complex organization in which you are applying constantly what you have been learned on MDDI. So how from your perspective, how is this hybrid methodology of MDDI is being applied in daily, let's say, or week by week?
Maybe in my case, from the ministry, the methodology and all what I've learned, I have to teach that to the public servants. We have been developing workshops. We are sharing information. Actually, for example, we are going to launch the laboratory. No, we have designed these alignments of how the laboratory should work. We have identified all the stakeholders. No, we are also connecting with the Fab Labs. No, and that's why we are having these. I hope so, because it also depends on the how you say on the politics, you know, and because there are a lot of changes in the country, no, but we really hope to have this launch in the upcoming months, no? And it's important to connect, no? For example, we are also encouraging the papers, no, having papers, research, no, inside the public sector that is not usual, no? And that's what we are trying to do. We also want to connect with the materials, no? In some weeks, we are having a workshop using the technologies of the Fab Lab, because we also connect the public sector with the Fab Labs. Because we want the public servants to understand how these technologies could work, how they can use it to improve a process from the handicraft or the artisans, no? And that's something that we want to do thanks to the information we gathered and I learned, no? Through the master, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you say. Not Victor, also the rest. Our experience, like working with communities in this hybrid model, let's say, I mean, for one side, I think it's quite successful because it brings the possibility to write to more people. So to basically be able to, let's say, contact with more people and share with more people. And I think so this is always important, because I think so this program, MDDI, the same as other, let's say, distributed programs, I think so what they does is to create, let's say, a common, let's say, language between the people. So what we were thinking is like, how can we combine all of these, like 3 walls, for example? I think so going through educational program like this one helps the people to talk that same language, you know, to create literacy in there that makes then the rest of the things more easy to happen. And we also believe we learn in a Fab Lab, so we learn touching things, and I think so. Sometimes it's more when you wanna let's say explain how something, the potential of something, when you experience it, sometimes it's even better than someone explaining to you. So combining, let's say, prototyping together with other, let's say, practices, it's always like a plus. So yeah. And then there's always nice things, for example, when you do a distributed program or something similar, that through the students and through, let's say, pushing the students to be in contact with communities and prototype, you also discover, let's say, a range of like a new possible, let's say, collaborators and interesting people that also can, let's say, help you to develop new things in the future. So it's always super nice.
Thank you, Santi. So John just wrote me in the chat. You were asking about the logistics, how the classes are organized, and how is the online learning experience. And basically, the classes go from Monday to Friday, and it's 3 hours maximum per day of classes online. Basically, we have synchronous and asynchronous students. So some students connect live to the classes depending on their schedule. And if not, all the courses are recorded and we share the recordings with the students and they can watch them when they can. And basically the learning experience is hybrid. So you have the online, as I mentioned, classes, and as well the in-person experience in your makerspace or your Fab Lab. So this depends on where you are residing right now. And for example, right now there are some students like Annie is in the Fab Lab in Montreal, and Victor is in Lima. Then we have some students in Shanghai as well that they are doing the in-person experience together. So basically this depends on which Fab Lab or makerspace you can connect to. I don't know if I answer your questions. If not, you can text me or even contact me by email. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions or you think we can wrap it up. Okay, so I think, yeah, we're 10 minutes over the schedule. So thank you all for being here. I hope to hear from all of you again soon, and we'll keep in contact. Thank you once again for participating to this webinar.